or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Chelsea Takamine, and I've been the challenge manager for this exciting challenge. So you've seen emails from me throughout the course of the past few months, and it's really exciting today to see some of your faces and to eventually chat with some of you, hear what your questions are, and hopefully get those answered for you. I'm based here in San Francisco at the IDEO office, and I've got two other teammates on the call as well who can go ahead and introduce themselves. So Ashley?
Hi, I'm Ashley Tillman, and I am originally from Colorado, but now also am based in San Francisco. And I'm the community manager for this challenge. So you might have seen me on the platform posting comments or over email. So for me, I was really excited. It's been amazing to see everyone's work and everyone sharing on the platform, and to get to see some of your faces here today. So.
Hi, everyone.
And I'll hand it off to Scott.
Thanks, Ashley. Hey, I'm Scott Shigeoka. I'm from Hawaii, the islands in the Pacific Ocean, but I live in Oakland, California now. And yeah, storytelling is just so important to me. It's been passed down by many generations in my family. And I'm actually going to post a link. It's been proven by science to be a tool for healing. So that's how I got into storytelling as a tool for healing. And my first job out of college was actually as a journalist. I was a reporter at the Washington Post. And so now at IDEO, at OpenIDEO, I do a lot of work around our storytelling. So that's what we're going to learn today and practice. And hopefully this is a skill set that you'll take not just today, but beyond too. But I thought first, let's start with a little icebreaker, a little activity to just get us centered in. I know some of us are in bed right now, and that's okay. You can do this in any way. This is also an opt-in. You do not have to participate if you do not feel comfortable. But we're just going to take 5 breaths together. It's going to be, take about a minute here to just take some breaths. So we're going to take a deep inhale together. And you're going to take an exhale. You can start by keeping your back straight and your feet centered and rooted on the floor. If that's helpful. Take another deep breath in. Another exhale. Feel free to close your eyes if you feel comfortable. You can take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. 2 more breaths, 1 through your nose, and out through your mouth. And a final deep inhale through your nose. And let it out audibly if you can. Okay, thank you. So breathing is actually a technique that a lot of storytellers use before they go on stage, for instance, if you're doing oral storytelling. And it's just a way of meditating and finding mindfulness, which is really great for creative confidence. Really a great tool for being compassionate on yourself to receive feedback, which is a key part of storytelling, which we'll talk about later. But thank you for those who joined us on that. And Chelsea, why don't you get us started with laying the context of what we're about to do?
Thank you, Scott. Thanks so much for starting us off this morning. So before we jump into storytelling, I just wanted to share, set a little bit of the context of where we're at in the challenge so far, where we've come from. It's been a great journey together and what's coming up. So joining us today, all of you are part of the short list of candidates, which is really exciting. So welcome, and again, congratulations. Your ideas were each reviewed by our team, and we're just really honored to have you on this journey with us. So as you know, in the last phase during feedback, you and your teams were chatting with the community or working on user experience maps, thinking more about your idea in hopefully a different way. At the same time, we were working with a team of external folks to help get your ideas reviewed, and we're able to share that feedback with you on your comment wall last week. So these are coming from folks that have experience in the disability and inclusion space, and we'll be sharing what organizations they came from with the community in just a bit. So you've already received that feedback, and so last week we shifted to this final improve phase, which is really the last opportunity for all of you to spend some time refining your idea, finalizing the language, making sure all the information is there that you'd love for our team to see as we ramp up for our final selection process. And so you've already received a lot of sort of information and details about that, but really just centering on the fact that these last 2 weeks have meant to be for a time for your team to come together and finalize everything. So maybe last feedback or refining the story about the way that you're telling your idea, which is why we thought, right now is a good time for us all to come together and chat a little bit about storytelling and what that means and how it can help all of us in our work. So before we jump into that, we had one question about the challenge process that I wanted to answer from Virginia, who's in San Anselmo, California, who was wondering about the logistics. So she says, how many people are implanted within the org, are invited to San Francisco, and what kind of guidance happens in the 18-month period? So just quickly to clarify, the winning organizations are not necessarily invited to San Francisco. So top ideas are selected and announced on July 10th to the entire community. So just coming up in a few weeks. And typically there are about 5 top ideas. There's usually invited to a 4-day human-centered design boot camp, which may happen anywhere in the world, not necessarily San Francisco. So the location is to be determined after we know where the partners are. And then, of course, receive 18 months of design support and a grant typically between $50,000 to $150,000 US. And so she asked how many people are invited, and usually it's 2 people from each organization. And the design support is tailored by a set of designers on IDEO.org's Amplify team. So there's not really one cookie cutter way that we're supporting organizations. If there was, there'd be more information on the website, but really it's just a very tailored process. So that's the answer to that question. So let's jump back into storytelling and really focus on that for the rest of the hour. And we hope that you enjoyed reviewing the storytelling toolkit, which has been sent out the past week or so, to hopefully kickstart your thinking about what you might want to get out of today and what we're talking about. So just to set the stage for what we're sharing today, a little bit of the goals of today is just to share some tips for how to make stories clear and compelling, and also just talking a little bit more about the importance of feedback in that process and sharing some of what you're thinking with others. So we'll do that by a little bit of a Q&A here with our staff, modeling some of what that looks like and hopefully getting you involved as well. And then we'll have Q&A at the end. So it'll be interactive. We'll jump back and forth into a few different ways of sharing this information. But keep us posted in the chat section if you'd like more of something or if we're not getting to your questions. So let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of those tips and tricks that we mentioned. So Ashley can kick us off and get started with that.
Thanks, Chelsea, so much. So I have just a couple questions that I'm going to ask Scott, our in-house story expert. And we'll start with an easier one. But Scott, why do you believe storytelling is so important?
Yeah, so I talked a little bit about, how storytelling creates healing and wellness. I think that's one part of it. I think the part that's really relevant for today is it helps us convey our ideas to other people. And that's so important for a lot of different reasons. I mean, everyone in this room has an idea, and you're looking for support, you're looking to improve that idea, you're looking to convey it to a whole bunch of different people, from funders to potential partners, to those that you're serving, etc. So storytelling is really about taking what's in your head and sharing it out with the world. I think, one of the things that research tells us is that we often overestimate what people know about the things that are in our head. So we tend to not share enough information or context, which leaves people confused, and can leave people not sure of what the next steps are, or what to do, or how to engage. And so really at the end of this workshop, hopefully you'll have some tools to help you develop something that's understandable and that's clear. The other part of that is it needs to be really compelling too, right? Storytelling is so important to be inspiring and to help people come on board to the work that you're doing. So we'll talk a little bit about that today too. Yeah, and if you have, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of folks in here too that have a lot of reasons why storytelling is important. And I'm definitely no in-house expert. I mean, I've done it, and I think we are all in-house experts. So I'm not one alone. Storytelling is a core part of the human experience. So if you have some ideas that you want to add to this question or any questions, like Kathy said, feel free to throw it into the chat.
Great, thank you so much. And then, Scott, we get a lot of questions come in about some of the basics or the ABCs of storytelling. And I know that there's no one size fits all, but could you share some of the tips and tricks or the do's and don'ts for storytelling within this context?
Yeah, so just like the design thinking process for solving a problem, you can use that for storytelling. The first part is really listening, right? So for listening, the way that I see it is who's doing this really well? Who's doing storytelling really well out there? And how can we better understand, what that looks like as inspiration? The second thing is, what do I already know about the way I'm telling my story? So how can I listen to people that I'm trying to serve and understand through feedback on how I can better, clearly share my idea with others. And a step there, right, is we have to understand who our audience is. So often when I'm creating a venture pitch for an organization or working with an idea on the platform, we'll start by listing all of the different audience groups. And we'll try to understand, and this is also in your toolkit if you need support on how to think this through, but we'll start to understand, like, what are the things that they actually need to hear from us, and what are the things that they're going to get motivated by through our story, right? So the same thing that you're trying to do with the design thinking process for an idea, you can apply that to a story. And then I think, really it's about coming up with what's that one sentence, that big idea that you want people to walk away with at the end of your story share, whether that's orally, through words, or whether that's through writing like you did on the platform. There's a lot of different ways to share a story, even beyond those two formats. Even before you think about format, what is that one sentence that you want people to walk away from, that one message? And then it's prototyping it, and it's actually sharing it in different contexts, hopefully with people that represent the audience you're trying to get this message across to. So going out and testing it with a current or potential partner or collaborator or funder and saying, like, here's the message, here's the idea, could you give me some feedback so that I can help reiterate this story, and setting them up with the right framework to give feedback is really key too. So something we use here at OpenIDEO is, what did you like about my story? What did you think was missing from my story? What would you say is the big idea, or that one sentence, so you can see if there's actually a connection with what you want to convey and what people are hearing. And then also, what if? So you can ask people to give you a what if statement, which would allow you to sort of dream big about your idea. But that's kind of the sort of the process of it. So again, it starts with gaining some inspiration, what success looks like in the world for storytelling, learning from the people that you're already in contact with, and listening in to understand what is the story that you want to tell, writing down actually that one sentence or that one message that you want to give across in your story, and to which audience groups, and also understanding what their needs and what their desires are, and then actually testing that, and then reiterating.
Thank you so much. And then we have a handful of ideas on the platform that are a little bit more technical, and would love to get your thoughts on how do you explain in a simple way some of these big complex problems and more technical solutions.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, like I said, there's a lot of different formats for telling stories. So one way that you could think about it is, would a visual or a graphic be really helpful to illustrate how your idea works, right? Again, this is a great way to test these visuals with someone who maybe might not be technically minded or have that expertise that you have. Show them that visual and ask them, tell me, and ask them, could you please walk me through what you're seeing in this visual, so you can better understand what people are seeing and if there's any changes that you need to make. You can also ask them, like, what would be helpful for you to see to help you understand my idea, right? So again, it's really just like design thinking. It's a really iterative process to building stories. So thinking about the different kinds of mediums is a great way to do that.
Awesome. And kind of building on that, the first part of the storytelling toolkit focuses a lot on making stories clear. Could you explain a little bit more about what that means and how you do it?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to realize, right, on the platform. One, it's a global audience, so people are coming from all over the world. And two, there's all kinds of different types of people in the world. That's what makes this world so beautiful. And we're also diverse, and we come at this with so many different experiences, so many different sort of identities, and so many different ways of understanding and processing stories or ideas, right? So I think the first step is just have an awareness of that, which I think everyone in this room does have, because, you know, this is a challenge topic that's that requires that mindfulness. But I think the second thing is to then think about, okay, given this vast audience group, how do we create something that's as clear as possible? How do we create something that people will understand and walk away with understanding? And so again, I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but the only way you'll know if your idea is successful in its translation to a vast diversity of people is to test it and to get feedback.
Nice. And you talked a lot about kind of making sure people have enough information and enough context. But how do you decide what information to put into your story? And do you have any specific advice around that?
Yeah, and I think that for those of you who are lucky to have a team, or those who don't, I mean, find a group of people and involve them early on in the story creation process. I think often the way we visualize storytelling is this individual that goes out into, you know, nature somewhere and is alone and is scribbling down, you know, some ideas by themselves. And that's one way to do it, definitely. And another way to do it, if that doesn't work for you, and something that we would definitely recommend is, you know, bring people into the process, not just during the feedback stage, but also during the production stage, so that you can sit down with everyone and ask, what are the things that our audience groups really need to know? That might be, you know, some high level things like, this is what our idea is. This is who it serves. This is the need that it's serving. This is how it would be implemented in the world. Like, those are 4 examples of questions that you might answer in a story about your idea, or in a write-up about your idea, but they might not be the right questions either. So depending on the audience group. So I think, you know, again, how do you bring people into the process, in the production side and in the feedback process, so that you can make sure that you're not missing anything?
And just to jump in quickly, if that's okay to interrupt, the questions that are on the platform that all of you have access to and have answered mainly already, those are the prompts that we're really interested in learning about. So take those questions and use some of, you know, the practices that Scott's sharing to talk with your team or other people in your community, or others that just know about your idea or maybe don't know about it. So those questions are already the ones that we've kind of pre-identified as ones that we're really interested in learning about. So use that as a guide to focus what you share in this particular context, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And with this particular context too, for storytelling, you know, with those questions, you know, test those. We find that those that are most successful in the challenge are saying to others that are, you know, confidants or friends or collaborators or funders, or even those that they're working alongside or with, here are the questions that OpenIDEO is asking, and here are the answers that we're giving to them. Like, what do you think is missing? Do you think that we're properly answering this question? Do you think that there's something that you know as a friend or as a collaborator that we do that we're not including in this write-up? And so really getting feedback on what you're using as an answer for our questions is going to be a really important part to coming up with something that's refined.
Nice. So in the storytelling toolkit, there's a one sentence activity. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So, and we can link to it if folks aren't able to pull up the storytelling toolkit in the chat box. But basically, starting on page 4, there's some examples of different ways that you can think about a one-sentence description of your idea. And so the 3 prompts that we use is 1, summarize your idea in 1 sentence. So that's really broad, and we're going to do some activities to help you do that today. 2, how would you explain your idea to a grandmother? Or another way of thinking about it is, how might you explain your idea to someone that's 12 years old? That's something that I use often. And what you want to get at here is this actually free of jargon? A lot of times when we're so wrapped up in our ideas in our industry, we tend to include a lot of words that make sense to people who work in our industry, but might not make sense to anyone else outside of it. So we want to make sure that we're removing that from our idea. And the 3rd is, how might you explain your idea to someone in your industry? And so this is kind of a way of sort of testing back whether you how would you actually still continue to use jargon with someone in your industry? Why or why not? Even folks that are in sort of in this field, they might understand some of the words that you're saying, but how can you kind of pare that back just in case they don't, right? So I think really those 3, the 2 last prompts in the toolkit are about removing jargon, making it more clear, making sure that a whole different or diverse group of people can understand your idea, and finally making sure that you're quickly conveying your idea to others, because I think often we find on the platform specifically that the ideas are very, very long, and they could be, and that's fine and great if that's what you're trying to convey with your idea submission. But sometimes you can say your idea in less, and sometimes less is more. So again, it's an iterative process. These are just helpful prompts that you can use, and we'll jump into it later today to practice that.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott, so much. I really appreciate you being willing to share both your own experiences and also bringing some of the research and experiments you've tried to the storytelling process. So should we give it a try with our own ideas?
Yeah, so I think before we jump into our ideas, let's kind of center in on something that's a little less high stakes. and I would invite everyone to participate in this. I think it's really great for you to get into the mindset of what we're about to do with our organization and our ideas, and you can participate again using the chat. So I want you to, in the next 2 minutes here, do 2 things. I want you to, 1, think about your favorite childhood story. So for me, I'm going to pick The Lion King, but you're welcome to pick any childhood story that works for you. And then the second thing you're going to do is think about that 1 sentence that you would use to share this childhood story, the summary or the plot of this childhood story, to someone who's 12 years old. Let's use that. So again, 1, think about your favorite childhood story. And then 2, you can actually write down or type out 1 sentence that would describe this story to another person, and think about this other person being someone who is 12 years old. So how would you describe this story in 1 sentence to someone who's 12 years old? So I'll put on some thought music in the background, if that's helpful. And we can all I'll actually participate too. I'll write a sentence out for The Lion King. You can pick your own story. Let's see. Okay, just about 30 more seconds. And it's okay if your idea is rough. This is again, just a draft, and the key part to storytelling is receiving feedback. And I would also encourage you to think about, if you're having trouble, if you're feeling stuck, thinking about why that is, going a little bit deeper into what might be holding you back from putting something down. Just 15 more seconds. And as you finish writing your idea or your story in your one sentence, you can feel free to put it into the chat for everyone to see. Okay, so I'll post mine, and anyone that wants to as well, I would really encourage you to post it in so that we can see it and you can get some feedback. So an example of something that I wrote was The Lion King. A young lion prince learns about the circle of life after taking his revenge on his uncle Scar, who killed his father. I mean, not perfect. Definitely, there's definitely some feedback there. I think there's three things I wanted to highlight in that example, though. One is, the first time I was writing it, I just put a young prince, and I was like, like folks might not know that that's actually a lion. And so again, being specific is really key. The second thing I did was I put in sort of I wanted it to be clear but also compelling. And so I used the words taking his revenge on his uncle Scar. I don't know if that worked. That might be a question I would ask. Like, did that actually come across as compelling? And then the third thing that I wanted to get across here was, I want to make things personal. I want the story to be personal. And if my uncle Scar killed my father, I feel like that would really resonate. So I might ask people, is that something that felt personal to you, or was that actually really traumatic and not something that you would want to include in the story? So again, it would be an iterative process. So let's see what other folks have written here. We'll go to Estelle. Cinderella. This is a story about a poor girl who was transformed into a beautiful princess, lived happily ever after with your prince. That's really great. I think the only, one of the things that I would give as feedback is I'm curious about poor girl, like that framing of poor girl. Does that mean like she's actually literally does not have resources or money poor, or does that mean that I feel really bad for her poor, right? So again, this is where feedback is really interesting, because sometimes words can mean different things to different people. That might be something that I flagged there, but I would say that's a pretty concise story. I won't go through all of these sentences, but really this is just a warm up to get us sort of in the element. But does anyone want to share theirs? Do they feel called? And more importantly, do you want to share the experience of writing this, or kind of what it's making you think? And you can go ahead and raise your hand if that is something that you are interested in doing, and we can unmute you. Anyone want to share how that experience? Okay. Let's see. It looks like you're unmuted, Virginia, if you want to share.
Okay, thank you. It's really interesting. Well, I realized when I thought of this book that it kind of mirrors my experience with this project. I chose Where the Wild Things Are, which is my favorite book. It's about I'll read it. Fear of beasts and bad things go away when a boy makes friends with them. So it's about a little boy named Max, and he's very afraid of the things in his closet when he goes to bed at night. that come out and can hurt him, and he ends up making friends with the beasts and having a parade with them. And so the process was kind of like, well, I realized that part of my challenge with my project is that I'm running into a lot of naysayers and people saying that because I'm working in South Sudan, where I have worked a couple different times for very long periods, and everything is very, very difficult in South Sudan. It's been repeatedly destroyed. Things that have been built up have been destroyed repeatedly. And there are so many obstacles that people get very, very overwhelmed and disillusioned. So I'm running up against that and trying to tell the story, not so Pollyanna that, oh, it's all going to be, everybody's going to be happy at the end and we're going to save 100,000 lives.
Right.
So, I really want to be realistic, but at the same time, not scare people away.
Yeah, so I think that's so great, Virginia, and we'll go a little bit deeper into that in the next activity, but a couple of things I just wanted to flag there. One is the importance of being truthful, right? So one of the parts of the Venn diagram of design thinking, which starts with desirability, one of them is the other two are viability and feasibility. And really, when we're thinking about our ideas, we want to be aspirational, right? But we also want to make sure that they're grounded in what's actually possible. And so I think that's great that you're thinking in that way. Another thing that I'm hearing is there's a specific context that you're working in South Sudan, and you've already gotten some feedback about how some folks feel overwhelmed. And so I think that might be something I would key in on as when you're going through your storytelling process of does my description of what I'm saying feel real, and does it feel like is it too overwhelming or is it too underwhelming? I mean, is it at that sweet spot? And then that can be a way for you to sort of work through what you're up against. I think what I'll also say in preface is that storytelling is a difficult process. It's not something that comes very easily, and it requires us to sort of go through these adversities in order to get to something that we really, really care about. When we're working on projects and we come up with that one-liner, I mean, sometimes that can take weeks to create. Same with writing the story of our idea or the vision or the need it serves. And so again, just reiterating it, saving all of your drafts so you can go back to previous versions is important. I looked at your idea actually as you were speaking on the platform, and I think that what I would say as something that I loved about your description of where the wild things are is, one, as soon as I read it and you read it, I knew exactly what you were talking about because I had read that book, right, as well. And so I would think about, is the idea that you are putting on the platform, is that one-liner something that's understandable to someone who doesn't have the context that, I might have reading your book, right? So if I don't know anything about wellness centers, if I don't know anything about South Sudan, is this idea coming across in my one sentence or in my idea submission? And the second thing I would say is the wording that you use to describe where the wild things are is very, very simple and clear, and might be inspiration for you as you give it another go with refining your idea. And again, we'll talk more about that and other sort of ideas that are in the rest of this group, but just some things I wanted to flag.
Can I jump in on that real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
Right. One piece of just additional context around the challenge and everything is one unique thing we like to think is that we aren't looking for you to have all the answers either. So totally, I know you spoke a little bit about painting too pretty of a picture and like the goal and the success. But really, we want to know those questions that you don't have answered as well. So as much as there's storytelling about what you're doing, it's also really important to understand what you haven't figured out yet. And those are the pieces that Amplify is really interested in learning about too. So it's okay if you don't know the answers to everything yet. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think a part of storytelling is being vulnerable and is sharing all of those things. And part of the feedback process is us understanding where you're at and also helping you find the pathways so that you can solve those questions and move through it. So I think that's really great, Chelsea. So we'll kind of jump into, for sake of time, at 7:40, but hopefully that has folks, you know, feeling really excited and energized and has their brain muscles moving around storytelling. Now we're actually going to apply this to our own ideas. And so, you know, I want you to think about your idea. Again, we're going to take about 2 minutes to do this exercise. And if you haven't already done this, even if you have, I would suggest you try it one more time. Think about your idea and think about that one sentence that you would use to describe it to a 12-year-old. So we're going to do the same thing we did with the childhood story, but with our idea. And again, when you're finished, go ahead and post into the chat and we'll be able to get some feedback on our actual ideas on the platform. And I'll play some music again. Just about 30 more seconds. And again, as you finish writing your idea and your sentence, feel free to post it in the chat. It'll also be helpful for us to see which ideas are present on this call. Thanks, Gabrielle. And if you could include the organization name as well, or the idea name, that would be really helpful. Okay. Just about 15 more seconds. Go ahead and type in your idea, name, and sentence into the chat. And we'll give you some feedback. Thank you to those who have done it already. Okay, so we're going to jump in here, and if you need, just a couple more seconds to type it in, if you need some support on that, let us know. You can raise your hand or sort of unmute yourself, and we can support you in that. The second part to being clear is really, making sure that your story is compelling. So we're going to take these two sort of aspects of storytelling, which is making a story clear and making it compelling. And I'm going to use the feedback questions that I just posted, and I'll just post it again since we have a wall of ideas here. And we'll just kind of go one by one down. you'll get some feedback from me, and then we can kind of open it up into larger question and answers after that, if that sounds okay. So I'm going to start with Gamariel, which is the first one, accessible information to persons with albinism in Tanzania, just a phone call away. So I guess what resonates with my story is I know exactly who it is you're serving. So that's very specific. That's great. I don't necessarily know. My question that I still have is what it is that you're doing to actually serve them. And so I see, what I'm seeing is that there's some kind of information that you're giving to them, and and you get that information through a phone call. I think, one of the things, just a phone call away, that sort of phrase is, I think there's a lot of, again, this is just my opinion, and I think a lot of other people will have different opinions on it. But I tend to shy away from taglines to explain my idea. So kind of like what you would see on a commercial or something like that, especially when it's about conveying ideas on the OpenIDEO platform, because we want to really understand what it is that your idea is doing, so that we can best provide you with feedback on your idea and connect you with folks that might be helpful. So as you reiterate this sentence, as you give it another go, I would think about how might you retell what it is that you're actually giving to people with albinism in Tanzania. So that's kind of my feedback there. And again, I'll go down the list so we can get through as many as possible, and then we'll open up to Q&A. And feel free, team, to jump in at any time. And so the next one is people with a disability will help other people with a disability who feel sad or insecure to find different ways to feel better. So again, I think this is pretty similar in that it's very broad. I'm curious if there is a particular disability that you're focusing on. And then there's sort of this element of sad or insecure. So I'm starting to piece together what it is that you're doing, but I'm not there yet. I want to understand, what does it mean to help other people? So I see that it's this peer-to-peer connection. So you're connecting two or more individuals that all have the shared experience of living with a disability, but I don't understand how that connection is being made or how they're actually supporting each other. So those are some questions I have. And again, these, it's really hard to fit everything into one sentence, right? So as you're writing down these questions or hearing this feedback, those are just things to take note of that are missing from your one sentence. So it might be, actually redoing your one sentence, or it might be, those are some things that I should add in the rest of my idea submission on the OpenIDEO platform. So again, this is from my perspective, and just walking through what feedback looks like. Ashley Coates, okay, our project uses cell phones and mobile technology to help share and collect information on HIV/AIDS with people with disabilities in Uganda. I think that's a really great one sentence. So I know that you're using, I'm curious about the difference between cell phones and mobile technology, but it sounds like you're using mobiles to both collect and share information to those that are in Uganda, specifically living with HIV and AIDS and who also have disabilities. Great, I understand who it is you're serving, I understand how you're serving them. And I think that, some questions I would have that you can maybe bake into the rest of your idea sort of submission on the platform, if you haven't already, is what if folks don't have a mobile phone? What kind of information are they getting through their cell phone or their mobile technology? What information are you collecting and sharing with them, and what does that look like? Like, I'm curious about the visuals again as we come up with different format suggestions. I think a need that I'm curious about is how is your information different for those that are living with a disability on HIV and AIDS versus those who might not be, right? Is there a specific context there that you're including that's particularly helpful for this audience group? Overall, great job. Estelle, accessible benchmarking reports from Enable Network. What if we could inspire more companies to be really welcoming to all of their customers and showcasing the best of the best? So what I love, what I think is really interesting about this one sentence is that you're taking it into a different direction, right? So you're using a what if framework and you're leading with a question. And I think that can sometimes be really powerful. I'm wondering what accessible benchmarking report says. For me personally, I'm not sure what that means. And what does it mean to be, I think there's a lot of different parts in here. So one is about inspiring companies. One is about having those companies understand what it means to be welcoming to customers. And again, my idea or definition of welcoming might be different than someone else in a different context or culture. And then 3, you're also showcasing sort of what great looks like, or the best of the best examples or success stories. So I think there's a lot packed into that one sentence, just something to be mindful of. I'm going to move on to Eric. So help children who need help get it sooner. It's very concise. I'm curious where the children are. Is there a specific geographical region? What sort of are they living with a specific kind of disability? And what does it mean to get help sooner? So something that you might want to elaborate on is, at what speed are they receiving help now? And how is your idea sort of improving that to make it quicker or faster? And so just, again, questions that I think of, but I think in this one sentence, I'm missing some context. So I think you could really go a little bit more specific here in some of the examples, for instance, in Ashley's example of really sort of defining the audience that you're working with. I'm going to maybe do 3 more. Okay, great. There's 3 more submissions. Okay. Kyoki is to keep wheelchair users moving year after year. We'll replace worn out parts via the mail after users send us an order by SMS. Broken chairs and broken mobility stop participation in the community. Will empower wheelchair users to keep their chairs rolling. Okay, so I think what I'm hearing from your idea is that you're repairing wheelchairs and they send out that they need a repair through SMS. I think you've added a lot of context around like why this is important and some language to make it a little bit playful. So we're going to keep wheelchairs users moving year after year. I think that's great. I guess my question is where is this happening? If I'm in the US, can I send in an SMS and will I receive that? I'm curious about the geographic location. And I think the second thing is broken mobility stop participation. So I think that, I think that's really the big thing. And the second thing is in your idea, you'll be able to talk a little bit more about how this process works. So some questions I have is, how long does it take for those worn out parts to get to users? What can they do in the meantime? If it takes a week for it to come through mail, what are some things that you encourage or suggest to them? 3 is, how do you know which types of parts that they need? Is there, if they don't know which parts are sort of worn out or missing? So I'm curious about the process of how folks send an SMS, how folks know about which parts need to be replaced, and what folks can do in the meantime before they're sent out to mail. I'm going to stop there, actually. I'm sorry, Angela and Virginia. I really want to get through all of them, but I think, again, just giving feedback, I think overall what I'm seeing is specificity is really important, both geographically and who you're serving. Really include the need that it is that you're serving, either in the sentence or in the idea submission on the platform. 4 is, try to move away from broad language. So things like people helping people or children, helping children get help sooner. Really start to elaborate on what help means or what sooner means or what it means to support people. So again, that's a little bit more about specificity. And again, that you don't have to fit everything into your one sentence. That it's just a way to sort of describe your idea, make sure that it's really clear so folks have a general understanding of what it is just from your one sentence. And you have all of that extra sort of canvas to play with on the idea platform. So I don't know, I guess we can open up to just sort of general questions, and we have about 6 minutes. So if we can keep the questions short so that we can support as many folks as possible, that would be great. And I don't know, Ashley or Kati or Chelsea, if you have anything to add to anything I just said.
Yeah, unless there's questions that come in immediately now, we have a bunch that you submitted ahead of time that Kati could start reading while we're waiting, if there's one you want to pick, Kati.
Yeah, definitely. So it's one of the questions from Eric from Lusaka, Zambia asked, how do we share compelling stories to those who are not insiders?
Yeah, so I think that your goal then is to find people who aren't insiders, depending on what that means to you. And then again, testing your ideas with them, and not just testing it, but also getting feedback and maybe working with them to sculpt a story that is actually compelling to them. So if your definition of an outsider means, or someone that's not on the inside is the framing that you use, is someone that doesn't work in your industry, or someone that doesn't have that specific disability, or isn't a child, then I would identify those individuals and talk to them and actually bring them into the storytelling feedback process. And I keep saying that over and over, but it is the most impactful part of this process. And you'll find that the more people that you talk to about your work, not only will you get feedback, but it could lead to some serendipitous benefits for you too. And I think the second thing is show it to those that you're serving. So if your goal is to work with children, then I would share your idea with the demographic of children that you're actually serving. So gather an individual, a 12-year-old child or a 10-year-old child, or maybe a group of them, share your idea, and then ask them, what they heard and what resonated with them, what was memorable. Ask them, what would be helpful or what was missing, right? Oftentimes you'll hear, whenever I put ideas in front of children, and this is my personal experience in a specific United States context, so it might look different in your case, but they're always like, I want more pictures, or I want more visuals, or that was too long, or I don't understand it, right? So again, they're going to really push you and challenge you to make it really simple, but also to make it really engaging too. So I think those are some ways to think about it. And again, it might be helpful to ask people who maybe are insiders as well, who are running their own organizations, and ask them, how do you translate your ideas and your story to folks that aren't on the inside, just so you can get some inspiration as you're writing your stories. I think that's a great question.
Scott, thank you. That was such a great build on how to use different strategies and even different mediums and different groups of people to test your story and really gather a lot of insights and feedback on those particular cases. So what a great build. So we just have a couple minutes left, unfortunately, of our session. So I just kind of want to take this time to close and really just remind everyone that if you have any additional questions, please email us at amplify@ideo.org, and we will parse out and get you some feedback based off of this session, as well as answer any of your additional questions for the rest of our challenge. So really want to take this time to thank Chelsea, Ashley, and Scott for joining us today, and really thank you all for joining us as well and bringing your great questions and bringing your comments and feedback to the session. So with that, we will close the session and send out the video recording for you to use at a later time. And again, feel free to email us at amplify@ideo.org. So thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks so much. And in the spirit of feedback, feel free to write your feedback about the workshop in the chat. Maybe questions that you still have, things that you're missing, and we'll be sure to get back to you. And thanks again for joining, and glad to see that it was helpful for some folks.
Yeah, thank you all.
All right. Bye, everyone.